I think that the acceleration of AI deployment is going to be significantly faster from pure tech perspective.
Mhm.
However, what I think the shift of forward deployed engineering will be is that organizational readiness. This is something that people think like, oh, center of excellence, oh, back burner. Nobody cares about that. Agentic center of excellence and operating model within the organization of how to manage agentic technology is going to become critical. It took me multiple iteration to repeat myself to say that this is way beyond tech, and
Yeah.
now I hear people saying it back to me. So I think the need will be right. Forward deployed engineering came out of need that people needed to understand and adopt and help with that technology. I think the need will further evolve as we get extra help and acceleration on tech implementation. I think the need will further evolve to get extra help and acceleration of putting in place operating model that helps owning that tech.
Welcome to CodeNinja Global Podcast. I am Bilal, and this is a podcast where we sit down with industry leaders, engineering leaders, practitioners who are on the ground, who are building the production reality of enterprise AI. Today's conversation is, what it takes for production-ready agentic AI to work inside real enterprise environments, beyond demonstration, beyond pilots, beyond demos. My guest today, Irina Gutman. She is Vice President, Forward Deployed Engineering at Salesforce. What is forward deployed engineering? Well, that is a role that gets called when, like I said, platform demonstrations meet customer reality. Irina runs this practice at one of the largest scales in the industry. We're going to be talking about what it requires for this role to truly work, what production-ready agentic AI, looks like when it succeeds, when it fails, what has changed in 2026 so far, and what does the next year looks like, where we are headed down the road. So, without further ado, let's get into this. Irina, thank you so much for taking out the time for doing this. First of all, welcome to the CodeNinja podcast. It is amazing to have you with us.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. So I'm going to start off with a question, which is one of my favorite questions because I love to know my guests and, the kind of a journey they've been on. So, this is about your journey and you being part of Salesforce for the better part of the decade. And as I was reading about Salesforce, the last decade for Salesforce has been, I think, one of its most transformative decades. We saw it on some of its most critical junctures. We saw, early days of Salesforce Einstein, and then move from predictive AI to generative AI. We saw some acquisitions. Tableau became part, Slack became part of the Salesforce family, and now Agentforce has been in, full motion. So I want to ask you, like, what that journey has been like, because you've been part of most of that journey. Uh, what were some key challenges along the way, and while building through those challenges, how does a company like Salesforce has shaped its thinking about AI over the years and where it stands today?
No, that's a great question. And my journey actually aligns very well with Salesforce journey. So I'm also part of one of the acquisition. I started my career in Salesforce with MuleSoft, which is their integration component. And 2 months after joining MuleSoft, MuleSoft was acquired by Salesforce. So I officially became part of the Salesforce family. When I worked for MuleSoft, I led their delivery discipline, helping to build out delivery for integration as well as their center of excellence offering specific to integration.
Mhm.
At that time, Salesforce was focusing primarily on predictive AI. Then the time brings us to the generative AI. And when Salesforce invested in generative AI, they make sure that there is an equal investment in successful delivery of generative AI. And I was fortunate enough to be presented with an opportunity to stand up and lead global AI practice for professional services. So, kind of as I said, my journey and journey of my team kicked off at the same time as Salesforce kicked off its commitment to generative AI. My team was global and we supported our customers across the entire ecosystem of Salesforce globally, helping them understand new technology, implement it, and adopt it. And then one day I got a call and said, hey, we're taking Agentforce live. Can your team help with the first 25 customers to present them at Dreamforce? I was like, what are we talking about? Agentic
Yeah.
is like wave three. And when I would do my podcast, I would say, we're here, we're here, but this next wave of Agentic is far away. And then
Yeah.
a few months later, I get a call and say, nope, it has arrived. And
Yeah.
here we come. We started our new chapter with agentic implementation because my team was the team of experts focusing on implementation of AI. We were naturally the team that was first in with agent force implementation.
Yeah.
And the next evolution of my team was merging into this new role, new shape, which is forward deployed engineering. So I'm currently leading one of the forward deployed engineering organization. And specifically right now, I'm focusing on telecom, technology, and media and entertainment customers.
Awesome. I feel like, each shift kind of required Salesforce to like re-educate its customers, rebuild its internal practices, and reposition its platform, kind of like every company, has to do.
100%.
Yeah. So you mentioned, forward deployed engineering, and as my memory serves me right, we saw this term emerge through a company called Palantir that pioneered
Right.
this term. But FDE became part of the Salesforce offerings quite recently, right?
Mhm.
And so, first of all, for those who are listening to us, can you like tell us what really is a forward deployed engineer, and what makes it fundamentally different from like a traditional solutions architect?
Yep, I'm happy to explain. This is one of the frequently asked questions. So,
Hey,
as you
yeah,
correctly pointed out, the delivery motion needs to change with technology because the way we deliver the core technology, or what we refer to as traditional deterministic technology, is different from the way we're deploying AI technology or agentic technology.
yeah,
One step forward, forward deployed engineering, this term and this role evolved or happened to be because of need. Industry recognized that this technology conceptually is so new that customers need a little more help, not only with implementation, and they definitely need help with taking new first steps, but also conceptually understanding and overcoming initial kind of organizational challenges, demystifying some of that AI and getting some of the AI literacy, as well as taking first steps. So, what do we have? Engineer normally locked behind the closed doors, right? You
yeah,
don't want an engineer to be customer facing, God forbid. They're supposed to be focusing on product and product only. Forward deployed engineer. You take the same engineering skill set, deep product expertise, combine it with consultative skills, and you forward deploy them at the customer site. Consider them as a SWAT team, multidiscipline. Sometimes we use the term full stack developer, meaning from a very beginning, like front end all the way to integration, but somebody who understands the intricacies of agentics, as I said, the product itself, the underlying technology that makes agentic AI work,
yeah,
combined with consultative solution skills. And we like to pair them with another role. We refer to it as a deployment strategist, somebody who can oversee the engagement, but also kind of understands configuration, solutioning, value realization, etc. So this very small but multidisciplined team, we like to deploy people in pods of three. Three seems like a reasonable number.
yeah,
Lands at the customer site to help overcome any barriers and help them get going with the technology. Think of it as the kind of agentic SWAT team that lands, removes barrier, and gets customer going. The
Yeah.
idea behind forward deployed engineering is not a long-term implementation team. It is literally the team that gets you going and gets you to your first value realization, and then allows you time to put a plan in place of how you have a sustainable model for scale and growth.
Right. But, as I was reading about it, I felt like there was a sort of a commercial tension here that I saw like worth understanding because I felt like could FD engagements be expensive? Because I sometimes feel like they require senior people sitting inside, customer environments for like sometimes extended periods as well. And how does that work? Does that work for like largest enterprise deployments or even medium scale enterprises as well?
So it requires degree of flexibility. First of all, that's why I said we like to deploy in the pods of three, and that allows us to mix more senior builders with the more junior builders, right? Or
Right.
offset different resourcing model. Uh, it should not be a long term. And sometimes, yes, FTs could be at the customer side long term, but it should be an exception rather than the norm. And it doesn't mean that three is a magic number all the time. We meet customer where they are. For example, when we serve our more commercial or a small business customers, we would go with one or one and a half resource versus some of the larger enterprises might require multiple FD teams. So you adapt your resourcing model and the duration of help that you're providing to the customer based on the customer size, scale, and the current need.
Right, right. And so, so you and I share similar conviction on this that NFD's role is to stay, you do not leave until it works, right? It is not like any other standard team that, hey, you go, this is the pilot, we've deployed it, adios. But NFD stays until it works. So, from your view at scale, working with multiple, clients, can you like give a couple of examples? Like, what does an FDE seed actually sees that nobody in the room, can see? Because you may have engineers in your company working with, longer than those FDEs as well. But what makes the seed so unique to, a typical engineer in the company?
So we have a unique perspective because we sit, as you said, in the seat that nobody does. It's at the crossroad of product innovation, right? We're the first one from the implementation side to see all the new product releases, betas, et cetera, et cetera. And at the other crossroad is the reality of the customer need and the industry needs. And that gives us a unique perspective to combine both the latest and the greatest that we know and we can use from a product capability with wide variety of customer experience that we can bring to every customer.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, so when that has happened, we come to the part of staying with the enterprise, right? Now, one thing is that, I learned that enterprise AI adoption follows like a very predictable arc. That is, there is enthusiasm about the pilot, the complexity of the integration, then there is resistance of the users, the realization that the data is not ready, and then the long slow work of actually making it stick. And most vendors are not really there for that arc. They're there for the pilot, they'll sell you the pilot, they hand off, and the FD is there for it. So I feel like there is a gap between how enterprises think adoption will go and how it actually goes, and that gap is enormous. So what do you think like staying teach you about how enterprises actually adopt agentic AI
Yep.
versus how the thing it's going to happen?
Well, if you're listening to this podcast, this is where you pay attention because we're going to share 5 success factors to
Yeah,
adoption at scale. So
yeah, yeah.
this part is important. Uh, I defined successful adoption of agentics based on 5 success factors. Number one, technology needs to work. and we
Yeah.
consider it table stake. But it is important. The technology needs to be stable and needs to work. Number two, it needs to be trusted. No one is going to put autonomous technology or AI in something that people don't really trust in the first place if it didn't earn people's trust.
Yeah.
Number three, it needs to generate true business value. It actually needs to be useful and solve true business problems. Number four, and it's overlooked, is experience. And we don't verbalize it. It's like, oh, it needs to work. It's all about data, but it's actually all about experience. Experience needs to be at par, preferably better than the ones that we have today. And the last one, and it's one of the major blockers to adoption at scale, is company self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
Company need to be able to assume responsibility for this technology twofold. They need to have skills to scale it and continue building it, and they need to be able to own it and manage it. If you think of agentics as a digital labor, somebody needs to have managers to manage that digital labor. So those five factors, unfortunately, all need to be true in order for company to truly adopt AI or agentics at scale and be successful with it. Now,
Right.
you also mentioned data. Data is cornerstone, right? Your AI is only as good as your data. But when I present at the conference and I do a poll and I say, hey, raise your hand if your data is perfect, like you can be a picture, poster child for data, hardly any hands go up, if any. So my next question is, well, what does it mean? Do we all pack and go home and go clean up our data and wait? And the answer is no, we can't afford to wait. So the progression with AI is a side step with progression of data cleanliness. You absolutely, as a company, need to have your AI roadmap and you need to have your data roadmap. But as you progress both, it's kind of y-axis, x-axis, you need to focus on just enough data for a given AI capability. This way, it allows you to not miss out on technology adoption, which, by the way, is not going anywhere, and only progressing and accelerating. And
Yeah.
at the same time, you are working on your data readiness and data cleanliness. So that incremental approach to data readiness combined with the five factors that I've just listed, right? Technology working, trust, business value realization, experience, and self-sufficiency really will get you on the success to adopting agents at scale.
So, you talked about data, right? And I think one of the reasons we keep learning that pilots and deployments are failing is coming down to the quality of the data that is being fed to the agent,
Right?
right? And then there is a giant gap between the enterprises thinks that the data looks like and what it actually looks like when the agent goes to work.
Yep.
So, like right now, deployment and this race for adoption is intensifying. Every enterprise is trying to implement agentic AI, in literally every other department in their companies. So, like when it comes to data, where are you seeing things go wrong? And then when the problem comes to you, how you, from your position, try and fix that?
So data comes in multiple shapes, right? We have structured data, which is needs to be in accessible place, in the form that is up to date, latest, et cetera, et cetera. But structured data is usually easier to deal with. And then you have unstructured data, like knowledge articles or any other forms of text.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things that also need to be cleaned up because guess what? We wrote that unstructured data, those knowledge articles were written for human consumption. And AI consumption is different, and those articles never had a need to be maximized for AI consumption. So there is a phase of data readiness that we work our customers through to help them, and there's a set of best practices to help them maximize their structure on and unstructured data to be optimal for AI consumption. What I like to say is that agent is going to look under the rock and all your dark corners. So I'll give you an
Yeah.
example. We were implementing an agent for one of our customers, and agent was making decisions and recommendation, and the customer's like, it's so wrong. No, 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 no. This is completely outdated policy. Well, we started digging and we did find that outdated policy that was 10 years old, that was never deleted. Nobody remembered that it existed, but guess what? Agent found it. So
Yeah.
when we talk about like when agent makes wrong recommendations, I said, well, let's look at the source. Are instructions wrong? Is there actually malfunctioning of the technology? Or it found a piece of data that you forgot about and now needs to be cleaned up.
Brilliant. Yeah. That I would say that would happen, like dozens of times, like in different scenarios and different environments. So, like, when we talk about agents and what they can do, the capabilities, the reasoning, the autonomy, right? Uh, I feel like an agent in a demo and an agent in a production are two completely different things, right?
Right.
And what do you think are the table stakes properties that have to be in place? We talked about data, right? In before an agent is useful, anything beyond demonstration as well.
Well, and we talk about so agentic technology and the way you build agentic technology is
Yeah,
evolving as well. Data is a key component, but the way agent is constructed, deterministic versus with a degree of variability and guardrails, right? If you think about the agent itself, it has multiple components. One, it has a job, a role. So what is this agent supposed to be doing, right? The jobs to be done. Second, it needs to have knowledge. Just like when you do a job description, you say, what is your role? What do you need to do? What information do you need? So knowledge is next. Knowledge translates to data, right? Next, we talk about, well, which channels is it going to communicate through? Is it going to talk to people through web, through chat, through mobile, through voice? And then we talk about guardrails. We talk about instructions, what it's supposed to do, and extrapolations of those instructions, what it's not supposed to do. So all those components are going to place for a live production agent. And the testing that agent in the environment, in the context, that's the interesting part about agents, right? Agents might behave differently based on the overall ecosystem that they're put in. So that's what testing product makes it so challenging, because when you're developing a product, you're almost tasting it, testing it in isolation, because you can simulate hundreds and thousands of customer environments. And
yeah,
that's where variability of behavior manifests itself when you put the agent to work within a specific customer environment. So the key cornerstone of the success of implementation is that definition of instructions, balance between determinism and variability, and guardrails that you put in place.
right. And in regulated industries, where I read that when where probabilistic outputs are simply not acceptable for certain workflows. And how can one scope what an agent is allowed to do? Where does that boundary get drawn, and who really draws it?
So the boundaries are drawn by the business always, but let's talk about, if you don't mind, a few aspects. We can cover the testing of agentic technology, what makes it so different, and also how we assess risk and define guardrails. And it's
Yeah,
related to regulated industry, but it could relate to any industry, because any industry that you touch, media entertainment, has very high requirements, or telco, or any of them, of privacy, right? Their customer privacy, laws and regulation. Any industry that you touch that goes beyond regulated industry has some kind of regulation that deals with privacy, security, etc., etc. So let's to start with, let's talk about why testing agentic technology is different, and then we'll talk about degree of variability versus like the determinism probabilism. Okay. Uh, when you test traditional technology, if then statement, you got a if, then this is what
Unless,
happens,
yeah, yeah,
or else. Pretty simple.
yeah,
Unless you touch this code, you're pretty much safe.
yeah,
Now, with agents, you might get different results. So, what do you look for? And the best example, the best analogy that I can give is that, let's say I'm giving a presentation. I'm covering certain slides. Let's say I give the same presentation at the next conference and I'm using exact the same slides, but I'm not going to speak word for word to those slides as I spoke at the previous event. Well, what does it mean? Am I being truthful in one event and lying to my audience at another event? No. There's a consistency of content, but there is a variability in delivery.
yeah,
How much variability? That depends on the customer. So when we test agentics, customer needs to define their risk tolerance. That's where you do the scoping of the use cases. And you need to define the degree of acceptable variability and whether that variability is in what I refer to as a delivery, right?
yeah,
Allowed variability, or it's actually changing the context. Now, how do we get there? We propose a very simple risk assessment framework. When we look at, and by the way, we have trust layer. I mean, there's a responsible by design technological safety measures that we have built in Salesforce. But going beyond that, we have a risk assessment framework when you ground your use case risk assessment at something that people are familiar with: people, data, business, and technology.
hmm,
And you lay out all the possible risk across those four categories, and then you write those four categories again, and you lay out mitigation across all those categories. Now, if you have a data risk, you might mitigate it with people and technology. So it's not necessarily one-to-one mitigation, but that allows you kind of a double safety, right? One safety comes from uh, technology itself, what the safety measures that we have built into the platform, combined with the framework that allows you to put together risk assessment, guardrails definition, a testing framework to test for those things.
right.
It- Go ahead.
Yeah, but I like wanted to ask you like so when you talk about frameworks, right? Responsible AI frameworks that is designed by different like vendors. And I read this article where the jab was at the vendors that the deeper issue is that these frameworks are designed for the by the vendor for the vendor's liability. They protect the vendor. They document that the vendor made reasonable efforts, but what they do not answer is the operational question the enterprise actually needs answered, which is not, is this platform responsible, but are we deploying it responsibly in this specific context for this specific use case with this specific data and for these specific users? Like, how is it different from this has to be like an internal capability that an enterprise itself has to build?
Well, the framework that I outlined has technology agnostic. It will work for any technology. And in fact, it is designed for the operations of each individual enterprise, right? Because it's not grounded in Salesforce, it's grounded in your operations.
Yeah,
People, data, business, and technology refers to a given client enterprise. Now, the responsibility is joint. We like to say nobody wants to become a headline for a wrong reason. If you take a screenshot of agent misbehaving, that hurts everyone: the vendor that provided that agent, as well as the company that implemented their agent. And therefore, responsibility is joint. You also mentioned use case definition, right? I talk to the customers like, oh, give me the coolest, the most interesting use case, the most complex that you ever built. I said I can definitely share with you a few pretty cool use cases, but if you're starting with AI, especially this person was from the bank, let's
yeah,
start with something very boring, very safe, repeatable, and bulletproof. So there are ways to start with use cases to kind of dip your toes in the water to have, and by the way, those use cases will probably yield more ROI than something super complex. If
Yeah,
you are eliminating or automating repeatable manual tasks and the frequently asked questions, those will get you more kind of case deflection and question deflection and probably yield higher ROI and is easier and faster to implement with lesser risk than something super cool and super complex. I mean, we're looking for benefits versus a wow factor, right? But what you mentioned is super critical, and that's why company ownership and self-sufficiency is the fifth success factor,
yeah,
because all those things and challenges that we're working with are real things. And it cannot be on the vendor alone. I like to use the term leading from behind. The vendor should enable you, could help you, provide all the underlying frameworks, capability, operating model, but the implementation, the leadership needs to be from the customer. Otherwise, none of it is going to work.
absolutely. And I think with that gap is, I feel like, where NFD would live, because again, they would be in the production in real time, seeing
Yep,
what worked, and discovering what the framework actually holds, and uh, uh, where it does not. Right. So again, that role becomes critical in these
absolutely.
situations as well. Right. So let's move to another interesting topic that I want to learn some things about. Is the industry's current thesis is that operational domain experts, the HR heads, the finance leaders, the operation leads, they should be able to build their own AI tools without going through the engineering, right? And I'm seeing that from the topic of coming through sovereign AI deployments, and where platforms are allowing these domain experts to build these tools by themselves. From like inside customer engagements, do you think this is actually working, and what does actually work if they try and do something like that?
I think it's a mix. And to be honest, I have kind of a mixed feelings about it. So in theory, there are more and more tools. I mean, you can build wonderful things with Claude Code, right?
Yeah,
But it depends on what you're doing. And it kind of goes through like when you use Claude or ChatGPT for your personal need, it is very different from using this technology, as we discussed, for an enterprise. So let's take it one step further. Let's say every domain expert has a capability to build the tools. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Well, my consulting answer is it depends.
yeah,
What kind of tools and what guardrails and guidelines do we provide? Is it personal work improvement tools? Okay, that's amazing. We're all helping, be more efficient, effective, but it also comes at a price. Let's say you and I work for HR department. You're able to build yourself an agent. I'm able to build myself an agent. Five other agents materialize. What happens? We potentially have duplicated agents. They're all doing different things. God knows if they have access to the data that they're supposed to have or not supposed to have. And we all spent time building it. I don't think we did it on our own time. So did we do it on company time? So I like to say innovation is great. We want people to be able to do those things, but I think it needs to be combined with some guidance. I like to say any innovation, any self-building should be with a purpose and
yeah,
with instruction. When I led global AI practice, one of my teams were innovation team. It was literally their job to push technology with the latest product capability, take it to the next level, and create some cool solutions. And my challenge to that team was always they had a rule. I said, if you build something, it either needs to go into the product or it has to be like an accelerator that's adjacent to the product. You are not allowed to create technical debt for the customer because anything that you create, I'm like, oh, cool, I built that. How are you
Yeah.
going to maintain it? How are you going to sustain it? How is it going to live with the rest of the ecosystem? So when we that and that's the main difference, because when people say is AI going to take over the world, I said not today, because it has so many things to consider. So,
Yeah.
before- so and
Right.
it's and the questions that people are asking, it's when they think about the individual use of AI. But just like we talked about, there's so many intricacies when you put AI in the context of corporate ecosystem that needs to be considered for those agents. So I don't want to discourage, and don't take me wrong, I am a huge supporter of people building, experimenting with this technology and building individual assistants. I think it's great. I use AI in my everyday life to help me with manual tasks, from the insights to reporting to idea generation, and it's great. But if we are saying, okay, every domain agent, every domain expert and
Expert.
owner
Yeah.
will be able to build their own tech, then they need to be subject to the same guardrails, rules, and regulations that any other engineer, so that this technology is not wasteful, it's not duplicative, it has the same safety guardrails as any other tech built by engineer.
Right. And like through now that I'm seeing that through some platforms, through vibe coding, that is sort of being made possible,
Mhm.
where there is a platform where you build a foundation, and then you connect it to Copilots, right? You can
Mhm.
connect it to Claude, you can connect it to Gemini, and then like a front facing piece where
Right.
you then create your tools. When we look at it from that perspective, then you really think that it becomes inevitable that we will see more domain expert
100%.
as builder models emerge very quickly.
100%. That's what I'm saying. It is important to have that operating model in place that takes that into account. So what I was saying is not that don't do it. I say do it, but understand what are the implications and consequences of this doing. And this is the model that we're moving on. When people ask me, would this model work? Would that model work? And I'm talking about operating model. I said any operating model will work as long as you nail the why. And if
Yeah.
company makes a decision that the domain experts are the best suited with the capability and technology available to them to build the tooling themselves, amazing. What do we need to put in place to make it happen, to make that motion as efficient and scalable as possible? Because you don't want to duplicate, as I said, effort, and you want to make sure that whatever is built within the enterprise complies with all the guardrails and regulations and data access as the rest, as any team, as engineering
Right.
would have.
Have you had the chance to see any organization truly succeed at the domain expert as builder model?
Uh, Mostly in the tech sector, right? So tech companies are more successful in that because a lot of departments within major technology companies
Yeah,
are
yeah.
technology savvy. So those are the front runners of that type of a model.
But I think to really see the true impact, it has to expand beyond the technology domain as well. Non-tech experts.
100%. But then we go back to the scenario is AI
Yeah,
literacy, understanding AI, right? So I some and the maturity. So what also makes it fun is that the ecosystem is so diverse. We have people who are vibe coding away and building their own agent, and like you speak to them and they're experts in the field, even if it's not their area of expertise. And you have customers that you have to explain what agent is and what it's not, and manage expectation around agentic technologies. So the maturity curve, the maturity levels are so vast within the ecosystem. And as I said, that diversity makes it fun to, as an FD, to be the first one in, because you never know what you're going to face as you land.
I agree. I agree. Okay. Uh, so with that, the very talked about topic of the future of work comes into mind every time. And this is a question I want to spend some time on with you, because you
Sure.
have a view across hundreds of organizations where most people in the conversation simply do not have. Work is changing, not in abstract but in right now in practice, right? And we are seeing impacts of that across bigger organizations to smaller organizations as well, right? And as we see these rules change, the rules are disappearing as well. The rules are being created that did not exist, before.
Correct.
You see all of that. So just like give us a glimpse of, what is the pattern that you have seen so far in the last couple of years?
Yep. So again, it counts with AI literacy. Are all jobs going to disappear? No, not. But jobs will evolve, and it's natural. This is not. This probably is the most dramatic change and the technology that behaves completely different from all other technology that we've seen before. But the evolution of technology coming in and changing the shape of workplace and the type of jobs that are available, this is not the first time, right? We're not going to go
Yeah,
back to printing press, but printing press is an example, conveyor is an example, right? uh, Drone operating did not exist some time ago. So, and we're saying, okay, helicopter pilots make the best drone operators. So there are multiple examples in the history where as technology becomes available and steps in, new jobs appears or existing jobs evolve. Let's look at AI. It is an expectation, and I think it becoming an industry standard that AI literacy and ability to use AI at some level, at least simple interaction with it and knowing what to prompt it in, is becoming a requirement, right? So step one is acknowledging that this technology is here to stay and it's going to
yeah,
change the way we work.
yeah,
Now, I would look AI, the way I look at AI is an assistive technology. I don't look at it as just AI. I look at it as humans augmented and empowered by AI.
yeah,
Will certain tasks go away? 100%. But what is AI good at? Right now, AI is good at repeatable tasks that require a lot of research, right? It could process a lot of information fast and give you back results.
yeah,
Yes, we need to kind of validate that those results are results that we can rely
yeah,
on, but so use it for what it is meant to do. Accelerate the tasks that would take you hours or days to do to complete them at minutes. And I would perceive of it as, okay, if AI is going to take certain tasks, how we can retrain, redeploy our humans so we can maximize the output from whatever company is doing. So if we can elevate our creative thinking to the next level of creativity and let AI take care of mundane, repeatable tasks, do the heavy lifting on research, but make recommendation. But the ultimate decision lays with the human, right?
mm-hmm.
AI, when AI, like AI made decision, unless this piece of technology is 100% autonomous, which some are, right? And it's tested and we feel that it's fully reliable. A certain percentage of decision making still lays with a human based on AI recommendation. So, just to summarize what I was talking about, step one, acknowledging that AI is here to stay. Step
Yeah,
two, understand what it's good at and use it and maximize the usage of AI for what it's good to see how it can augment, accelerate, and help you be effective at your job. And then seek it challenges, by the way, us to be better and continuously learn to have beginner's mindset, but then also think how we can elevate and expand our skill set and responsibility to tackle certain areas that we didn't have time to tackle before.
right. And you mentioned creativity, and from that, in my mind came this mention of topic of cognition. And I've read like in multiple places that there is a cognitive displacement as well. right? And I have read so many at places and articles like we're seeing cognitive tasks compress: drafting, coding, modeling, research, assistance, and each professional layer is becoming thinner, but
We're
at the same
becoming
time.
lazy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you can put it, you can absolutely put it that way. But many companies, have a mission that they center on human machine harmony, not replacement, right? And displacement concerns is still no longer
They're real.
theoretical, right? And we are in a world with accelerating automation. Human rules are which human rules would endure. But how do you think we design systems that create mutual uplift between humans and machines, rather than, I would say, economic redundancy?
So if you think about it, we had like the phone books, right? And you had to write phone numbers down. You probably remember half of the phone numbers in your book. Now all your
Yeah.
phone numbers are in your smartphone, and nobody remembers a phone number because all you do is click a button and the phone
Yeah,
does it
yeah,
for you. So
yeah.
yes, we do have a tendency relying on the technology, but I think it is a responsibility on us not to become lazy. I saw a meme on internet that said, it took me an hour to do a given task. Now I spend an hour to explaining that task to AI so it can execute.
Yeah.
So I think we're evolving together with technology, but it goes back to that understanding of what it does, but it also puts an accountability on us not to become lazy and not to lose that critical thinking. And I'm not saying it's not a real problem. It is a real problem, but
Yeah.
I think step one, understanding that this is happening, and then tasking ourselves to exercise that critical thinking, to go beyond what's AI offering us on the surface, to truly use it as something that augments and accelerates our ability to achieve an outcome, but then saying, okay, it helped me to get to this outcome. What can I do with it next? Applying our critical thinking to elevate it to the next level. And some jobs will become redundant, but I'm hoping, I'm going to be cautiously optimistic that those jobs will evolve into new, creative, and more interesting jobs for humans to do.
But we have to pass
But we
back
have
into any
to,
phase of disruption, right? There has to be.
we do. But I
Okay.
think we need to be cognizant that this is happening and say,
Yeah.
okay, we need to prepare for it. A lot of things need to change. And I'm not saying it's easy. It is a problem, right? In
Yeah.
schools, if something, and again, we have a tendency to be lazy. If something is presented to us on a silver platter, why would we dig deeper? And it is different for adults and children. We have foundational knowledge that we're basing that capability on, and we have trained critical thinking to take it to the next level. If you start with everything is going to be done for me, then you have
Yeah.
no reason to exercise that critical thinking to begin with. So, foundationally, a lot of things need to be changed, starting with the education system, which now needs to take into account that this technology is available to students and young professionals and young people are going to use this technology. So how do we challenge them in a different way? And extrapolating that to professional world, right? And saying, okay, if everyone is using this is amazing. Does it mean that they have extra capacity to do XYZ? Does it mean that they have extra capacity to learn? Are we expecting more output? Because I think you talked about the economic model. If you don't look at it as a displacement, but rather look at it as a force multiplier, then I think we have potential to achieve even greater economic results.
I agree. I agree. Let's end it on the final question, which comes back to your position that you're currently in, and I'm sure you would be able to see it at least 5, 10 years from now. We fast forward, say 12 months, right? Because I can't say 5 years
Again.
because the pace is, very confusing right now and complex. So let's just fast forward 12 months. What is like a forward deployed, seed going to be like? That is what it's not doing today. How does that rule evolve 1 year from now?
Yeah, well, it is a very hard question. And I tell you, I remember I started the call, our conversation with saying that I thought agentic era is far away, and it happened months and months sooner than I anticipated. So it is really hard to predict AI evolution, and therefore it is going to be a little hard for me to predict the evolution of forward deployed engineering role. But let's kind of give it a try. I definitely think that usage of AI tooling in the role is going to become more prominent. I think that the acceleration of AI deployment is going to be significantly faster from pure tech perspective.
Yeah,
However, what I think the shift of forward deployed engineering will be is that organizational readiness. This is something that people think like, oh, center of excellence. Oh, back burner. Nobody cares about that. Agentic center of excellence and operating model within the organization of how to manage agentic technology is going to become critical. It took me multiple iteration to repeat myself to say that this is way beyond tech, and
yeah,
now I hear people saying it back to me. So I think the need will be right. Forward deployed engineering came out of need that people needed to understand and adapt and help with that technology. I think the need will further evolve as we get extra help and acceleration on tech implementation. I think the need will further evolve to get extra help and acceleration of putting in place operating model that helps owning that tech. Agent managers, agent owners. How do you create an organic ecosystem where agents and humans coexist? This is an undertaking, and I think there is a possibility for this role to evolve more as implementation of tech becomes easier with the
yeah, I
tech, with the
agree.
use of tech.
Yeah, yeah. And that is the necessity. I think that is going to be the necessity. Yeah. And so, like, what is it for you? Like, how do you see yourself in this role evolving in the next couple of years? How it's looking like for you?
So I come from a strategy background and actually organizational design background. So for me, the organizational evolution is wow. I enjoyed that space so much. I wrote content on Agentic COE. So I love tackling the people process side of it. But it gives me a tremendous opportunity to learn the tech. So I evolve myself by continuously, embracing new technology and learning how I can use it better in everyday life. I'm learning how to use Claude Code more effectively, incorporating with my everyday tasks. So I think as a leader, and as a leader that leads a very technical, innovative team, I will have an accountability to continue keeping up with both the tech and the customer needs to be able to be more effective leader for the teams that I need.
Absolutely. And the message I think we would give away from this is you build, the foundation, try and own the intelligence, and make sure you have someone willing to stay in the room until it actually works.
Yes, bring your partner with your friend, forward deployed engineer to be successful. But what we started with is a joint accountability. Unless you have a skin in the game, unless you have a commitment to implement this technology at scale, it's gonna stay at the pilot stage the minute FDs walk away.
Absolutely. Arena, absolute pleasure, talking with you and discovering all these topics. And I would love to, have you again sometime.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time.
Take care.